During my daughter's wedding, when everyone was celebrating, my grandson whispered to me with horror in his eyes, "Grandpa, you have to stop this wedding immediately." I was surprised. "Why, child?" He told me the shocking truth that shattered the illusion of happiness. 30 minutes later, the police arrived and justice struck like lightning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Wayne looked me up and down as I stepped through Nancy's apartment door, his eyes lingering on my jacket with undisguised disdain. "So you're Nancy's dad? Look exactly like she described. Typical suburban pensioner with those traditional views." I extended my hand anyway. "Pleasure meeting you, Wayne." He ignored it completely, instead pulling Nancy close against his side like marking territory. My daughter's cheeks flushed pink as she tried to smooth over the moment. "Dad, come in. Dinner's almost ready." Nancy's voice carried that forced brightness I remembered from her childhood, when she'd broken something valuable. Wayne had already claimed my usual spot, the blue armchair by the window where I always sat during visits. He spread himself across it like he owned the place, expensive watch catching the light as he gestured dismissively at the room. "These old furnishings?" He shook his head at Nancy. "Sweetheart, we'll definitely need modern updates after the wedding." Leo glanced up from his homework at the kitchen counter, catching my eye with a look that said everything. My 15-year-old grandson had always been perceptive. "Dad likes that chair," Leo said quietly. Wayne's laugh was sharp. "Well, he'll have to get used to changes. That's what happens when families evolve." Nancy bustled around the kitchen, serving plates with shaking hands. The apartment felt smaller somehow, with Wayne's presence filling every corner. Through the windows, Denver's skyline glittered in the February twilight, but inside the warmth I'd always felt here had chilled. "Archie, you still living in that same house?" Wayne's tone suggested this was somehow pathetic. "Same neighborhood for what, 20 years?" 32. I kept my voice level. "Ah," he nodded knowingly. "Set in your ways. Nancy mentioned you don't like change much." My daughter shot him a warning look, but damage was done. I watched her realize this introduction wasn't going according to plan. The hope in her eyes from when I'd arrived was dimming. During dinner, Wayne dominated conversation, talking about his business consulting work in vague terms that meant nothing. When Nancy tried to mention Leo's recent academic achievements, Wayne steered discussion back to himself. "The boy needs more discipline," Wayne declared, not looking at Leo. "Kids today lack structure. In my day, we learned respect." Leo's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Nancy's knuckles whitened as she gripped her water glass. "Leo's a good kid," I said firmly. Wayne's smile never wavered. "Of course you'd think so. Grandfathers always see things through rose-colored glasses." By 8:30, I'd cataloged enough red flags to fill a notebook. The way Wayne spoke to Nancy like she was simple. How he criticized everything from her apartment to her cooking. His complete dismissal of Leo's presence, except to criticize. "Well," I stood, gathering my jacket. "Thank you for dinner, Nancy." She walked me to the door, worry lines creasing her forehead. "Dad, I know Wayne can seem—" "Different people show different sides of themselves," I said carefully. "Give things time." But as I kissed her goodnight, I caught Wayne watching us from his stolen chair, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes like he'd won something. The elevator descended in silence. In the parking garage, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, engine idling. Through the concrete pillars, Denver's lights blurred together. I needed to warn Nancy. But how do you tell your daughter that her happiness is built on quicksand without becoming the enemy? Sleep came in fragments that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Wayne smirk as he dismissed my handshake. By 7 a.m., I was in my kitchen making coffee with unsteady hands. Nancy called before I'd finished my first cup. "Dad, I need to come over. We need to talk." Her voice carried that tight edge I recognized. Anger held barely in check. She was coming to defend him. 40 minutes later, she stood in my kitchen doorway, refusing the chair I'd pulled out. Her work clothes were wrinkled like she'd grabbed them off the floor, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "You hated him?" The words shot out before I'd even offered coffee. "I could see it on your face." I set down my mug carefully. "Nancy, something about Wayne doesn't sit right with me." "Here we go again." She began pacing between the counter and window, hands cutting through the air. "Dad, you always do this. Remember how you poisoned me against Jason, made me doubt everything? And he turned out to be perfectly decent. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Jason cheated on you, Nancy. So what? Her voice cracked like breaking glass. At least he wasn't some monster you made him out to be. Wayne is different. He loves me. I watched my daughter unravel, the morning sunlight harsh through the bay window. The frost on my garden was melting, water streaming down the glass like tears. I saw how he treated you last night. How he treated me? Nancy whirled around. He was nervous. Meeting your father for the first time is intimidating, especially when that father has a reputation for driving away every man who comes near his daughter. My hands found the familiar weight of my coffee mug. I've never driven anyone away. Jason left because of you. Jason left because he was sleeping with his secretary. Stop! Nancy slammed her palm against the counter. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. I won't let you destroy my happiness again. Wayne makes me feel special, wanted. When was the last time you bothered to ask what I needed? The accusation hung between us, sharp as broken china. I thought of all the dinners she'd skipped, all the calls that went to voicemail, all the ways she'd been pulling away since Jason. Nancy, listen to yourself. No, you listen. She grabbed her purse, keys jingling like wind chimes. I'm 42 years old. I don't need Daddy's permission to fall in love. Wayne asked me to marry him, and I said yes. You can either be happy for me, or you can keep your judgments to yourself. The words hit like physical blows. I reached for her arm, but she jerked away. I've made my choice, Dad. Now you make yours. Support me, or lose me. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the teacups in their cabinet. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our relationship. My coffee had gone cold. The newspaper lay folded and unread. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at something unseen. I sank into the chair Nancy had refused, feeling every one of my 68 years settling into my bones. The silence pressed against my eardrums like diving too deep. She was wrong about Jason. I'd never poisoned her against him. I'd simply asked questions she didn't want to answer, but by the time she'd discovered his affair, the damage was done. She'd stopped trusting my judgment, stopped believing I wanted her happiness. And now here we were again. Same dance, different partner. Except this time, she'd thrown down an ultimatum. Support Wayne, or lose her forever. I picked up my cold coffee, then set it down untouched. My reflection stared back from the black surface. An old man who'd lost his daughter twice now, once to a cheater, once to his own honesty. The morning stretched ahead, empty as my kitchen. I needed to think, needed space to figure out how to save my daughter without losing her. My keys sat by the door where I'd dropped them last night, when the world still made sense. Time to go somewhere quiet. Time to remember how we'd gotten here. 20 minutes later, I sat on my favorite bench at City Park, watching ducks dive for breakfast in the cold pond. The morning frost was melting under February sun, steam rising from the grass like ghosts of winter. My hands had finally stopped shaking. 8 years. That's how long since Nancy's first marriage imploded, since I'd watched her world crumble because I'd been too polite to push harder against Jason's red flags. She'd been 34 then, glowing with new love after a string of rebellious boyfriends who'd worried me for different reasons. Jason seemed stable, an accountant with a downtown practice, polite manners, steady income. When he proposed after 6 months, I'd actually felt relieved. The warning signs started small. How Jason would redirect Nancy's attention when she talked to other men, even waiters or store clerks. How he'd developed opinions about her friends. Sarah was too loud. Michelle drank too much. Karen filled Nancy's head with feminist nonsense. Gradually, Nancy stopped mentioning their names. I'd tried subtle questions. Haven't seen Sarah lately? Everything okay? Oh, you know how it is, Dad. We're all so busy. But Nancy's laugh had sounded hollow, and she'd changed the subject quickly. By their first anniversary, Jason was choosing Nancy's clothes for parties, explaining they needed to present a professional image for his clients. He'd moved them to a house in Littleton, 40 minutes from family and friends. When I'd visit, Jason would hover, interjecting his own interpretations of Nancy's stories. The final confrontation came when 7-year-old Leo had mentioned Uncle Jason's work friends, who visited when Mommy wasn't home. Young voices carry truth like church bells, impossible to ignore once you've heard them ring. I'd found Jason in a Cherry Creek bar 2 nights later with a 26-year-old paralegal from his firm. They hadn't seen me, too absorbed in each other to notice an old man nursing a beer in the corner booth. I'd watched them for 20 minutes, cataloging evidence I didn't want to possess. Telling Nancy had been like defusing a bomb. She'd screamed accusations of jealousy, of wanting to control her life, of never letting her be happy. But when she'd confronted Jason, his denials crumbled under Leo's innocent questions about the pretty lady with yellow hair who brought cookies. The divorce took 8 months. Nancy had moved back to Denver, hollow-eyed and brittle. Leo started having nightmares. I'd helped them rebuild one day at a time, until Nancy's laugh sounded real again, but she'd never forgiven me for being right. A jogger passed, earbuds blocking out the world, and I envied his simple rhythm. Left foot, right foot, no complicated family dynamics to navigate. Wayne's behavior last night mirrored Jason's early patterns. The territorial marking, the subtle dismissals, the way he'd positioned himself as Nancy's interpreter and defender. But this time, Nancy had issued an ultimatum before I'd even voiced concerns. Support me or lose me. Behind me, a maintenance worker gathered fallen branches from the night's wind. Life's debris cleaned up and carted away like it never mattered. But family debris stuck around, composted into resentment and regret. The ducks had finished their diving, now paddling in lazy circles. A mother duck kept her ducklings close, occasionally nudging wanderers back toward safety. Protection looked different from the outside, sometimes like love, sometimes like control. My phone buzzed, text from Leo. "Grandpa, can we talk? Something's weird about Wayne." Smart kid, maybe the smartest of all of us. I stood, brushing frost from my jacket, and scattered my remaining breadcrumbs on the water. The ducks converged eagerly, trusting that what fell from above was nourishment, not poison. Time to listen to the one family member who saw clearly, unclouded by adult longings and ancient grudges. Time to find out what my grandson had noticed that the rest of us were too blind to see. The walk back to my car felt purposeful for the first time since Wayne's handshake snub. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. Leo's text had given me something I'd been missing all day, hope that I wasn't losing my mind. I spent the afternoon in my back garden, pruning the bare rose bushes that lined the fence. February in Denver meant cutting back to the bone, preparing for spring growth that seemed impossible in the frozen ground. The physical work helped clear the morning's argument from my head, each snip of the shears decisive where my thoughts had been muddled. At 3:30, I heard the familiar thud of Leo's backpack hitting my front porch. He appeared around the corner of the house, still wearing his school uniform, khakis and navy polo that made him look younger than 15. "Granddad, Mom seemed really upset this morning." He picked up a fallen branch without being asked. "Did you two argue about Wayne?" "We had words." I made another cut, watching dead wood fall away. "Your mom's protective of her choices." Leo held the branch while I worked, our routine as comfortable as breathing. We'd been doing yard work together since he could barely hold a rake. "I don't like Wayne either." The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in all week. "He acts weird when Mom's not around." I paused, pruning shears halfway to the next branch. "What do you mean by weird?" "He goes through our stuff." Leo's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Looks at family photos for a really long time, like he's memorizing them. Always texting someone when he thinks nobody's watching." The shears felt heavy in my hand. "Anything else?" "He has 2 phones, Granddad." "Who needs 2 phones?" A cardinal landed on the fence post, bright red against the gray afternoon. Even the birds seemed to be listening. "When did you notice this?" "Last weekend when Mom went grocery shopping. I was doing homework, and Wayne started looking through the papers on her desk. You know, the ones with bank statements and stuff." Leo shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "When he saw me watching, he acted like he was just tidying up." The sun was setting behind the Rockies, temperature dropping fast. I gathered my tools, motioning Leo toward the house. "Come on, let's make some hot chocolate." In my kitchen, Leo pulled out his favorite mug, the Denver Broncos one I'd bought him 3 Christmases ago. I heated milk on the stove while he sat at the counter, Backpack unzipped, homework forgotten. There's something else. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug when I handed it to him. Wayne asked Mom about your house, how much it's worth, whether you have a good pension. Mom told him it wasn't his business, but he kept pushing. I leaned against the counter, my own mug untouched. Did your mom seem bothered by the questions? Yeah, but she made excuses. Said he was just curious because he cares about family. Leo took a sip, then looked up at me with eyes too old for his face. Something about him feels wrong, Granddad, like he's acting all the time. Outside my kitchen window, streetlights were flickering on along the quiet Cherry Creek neighborhood. Normal Friday evening. Normal houses with normal families having normal problems. But sitting across from my grandson, I felt the weight of something abnormal pressing against us. Leo, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't let Wayne know you've been watching him. Keep doing your homework. Be polite, but pay attention. Can you do that? Leo nodded solemnly. Are you going to tell Mom? Not yet. Right now, it's just observations. But if you see anything else, I'll tell you first. He finished his hot chocolate and packed up his homework, mentioning a sleepover at his friend Marcus's house. I walked him to the door, watching him trudge down the sidewalk with his overstuffed backpack, looking like any other teenager heading to spend Friday night playing video games and eating pizza. But he wasn't any other teenager. He was my ally now, my eyes and ears in a situation I couldn't navigate alone. I stood in my doorway until Leo disappeared around the corner, then closed the door against the February cold. The empty hot chocolate mugs sat on my counter, steam still rising from mine. For the first time since meeting Wayne, I didn't feel completely powerless. The house felt enormous after Leo left, every sound amplified by silence. I washed our mugs slowly, running hot water longer than necessary, postponing the moment when I'd have to face the evening alone with my thoughts. 8 o'clock found me pacing the hallway, stopping at the gallery of family photos that lined the wall like a timeline of happier years. Nancy at 5, gap-toothed and grinning on her first day of school. Nancy at 18, cap and gown, the whole world ahead of her. Nancy at 26, radiant in her first wedding dress, Jason beaming beside her like he'd won the lottery. I'd been proud that day. Jason seemed stable after Nancy's string of rebellious boyfriends, musicians and artists who'd made my stomach churn with worry. An accountant felt safe, responsible. How wrong I'd been. I moved to the living room, settling into my late wife's favorite armchair. Helen had always said I worried too much about Nancy, that our daughter needed to make her own mistakes to learn from them. Trust her judgment, Archie. She's stronger than you think. But Helen had been gone 3 years now, and Nancy's judgment seemed to be getting worse, not better. I made myself a cup of tea I wouldn't drink, just needing the ritual of boiling water, steeping leaves, adding honey. Outside my kitchen window, the neighbor's motion light kept flickering on and off as raccoons raided garbage cans. Normal suburban problems. Normal suburban night. Nothing felt normal anymore. Leo's observations played on repeat in my head. 2 phones, going through financial documents, questions about my house value and pension. The pieces formed a pattern I recognized from crime shows Nancy used to love watching. Someone casing a target, gathering intelligence, preparing for something bigger. But what if I was wrong? What if Wayne was just awkward, just curious about the family he was marrying into? What if my distrust of him came from the same place that had made me suspicious of Jason? An old man's jealousy that another man could make his daughter happy? I walked to Nancy's old bedroom, now converted to my office and spare room. Her high school photos still decorated one wall. Prom queen, debate team captain, soccer star. She'd been fearless then, ready to conquer the world. When had she started choosing men who diminished her instead of celebrated her strengths? My phone sat silent on the nightstand. No calls from Nancy. No apology for the morning's harsh words. No bridge offered across the chasm that Wayne had already begun digging between us. The smart thing would be to call her, apologize for interfering, promise to support her choices, keep the peace, stay in her life. But Leo's worried face kept surfacing in my memory. The way he'd whispered about Wayne's strange behavior, like he was afraid someone might overhear. Kids were honest about people in ways adults had trained themselves not to be. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but dismissed the idea immediately. Nancy would see it as the ultimate betrayal if she found out. More evidence of her paranoid father trying to control her life. Back in the living room, I stood at the window overlooking the street where Leo had walked to his friend's house. Porch lights created pools of warmth in the February darkness. Inside those houses, families were settling in for the evening, homework and television and ordinary conversations about ordinary days. I envied them their simplicity. Helen's voice echoed in my memory. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone fall. Be ready to catch them, but don't prevent the lesson. Maybe that's what Nancy needed. Space to discover Wayne's true nature on her own timeline, without her father's interference clouding her judgment. If I pulled back, stopped asking questions, stopped radiating disapproval, maybe she'd start seeing what Leo and I had already noticed. And if Wayne was planning something, financially or otherwise, maybe my distance would make him overconfident, careless, reveal his hand too early. The grandfather clock in my hallway chimed 11:30. Time for bed, time to let the day's worries settle into whatever wisdom sleep might bring. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, my decision made. I'd give Nancy the space she'd demanded. Stop voicing concerns. Stop asking pointed questions. Let Wayne think he'd won. But I wouldn't stop watching. And neither would Leo. Sometimes love meant stepping back, but it never meant giving up. The week that followed taught me the weight of strategic silence. I kept busy with routine, grocery shopping, library visits, coffee with old colleagues from the engineering firm. Normal activities that felt anything but normal, while Nancy's angry words echoed in my memory. She didn't call, neither did I. Leo texted twice, once to say Wayne had been asking more questions about family finances, once to report another mysterious phone call taken on the balcony. I responded with careful encouragement to keep observing, but stay safe. By Wednesday, the silence became unbearable. Nancy called that evening, her voice carefully neutral. Dad, I was thinking, maybe we could have dinner Friday, all three of us. Start over. I knew what start over meant. Except Wayne. Stop asking uncomfortable questions. Pretend my instincts were wrong. That sounds nice, sweetheart. Where did you have in mind? Mountain View Diner, 7 o'clock. The choice surprised me. Mountain View was our place, where I'd taken Nancy for birthday dinners as a child, where Leo and I still went for pancakes on Saturday mornings. Family territory. Friday evening found me arriving 20 minutes early, choosing a booth along the back wall where I could watch the entrance. The restaurant buzzed with its usual crowd, families celebrating small victories, couples on budget-friendly dates, teenagers sharing milkshakes and dreams. Nancy and Wayne arrived precisely at 7, Wayne immediately taking charge of the situation like a general surveying conquered territory. Archie, good to see you again. His handshake was firm, possessive, meant to establish dominance. Nancy picked a charming little place, very nostalgic. The word dripped with condescension. I slid into the booth, letting them choose their positions. Wayne positioned himself across from me, Nancy trapped between us like a referee in a boxing match. So, Wayne spread his menu with theatrical flourish. Let's order the best this establishment has to offer. Archie, what do you recommend for a man with expensive tastes? I kept my voice level. The meatloaf's good. Been getting it here for 20 years. Meatloaf? Wayne's laugh carried no warmth. How wonderfully traditional. Nancy, darling, what about the salmon? I'm sure it's adequate. Our waitress, Betty, had been working here since Nancy was in elementary school. She recognized the tension immediately, her professional smile tightening as Wayne ordered wine from their limited selection, complaining loudly about vintage options. Dad, Nancy jumped in quickly, Wayne and I have been talking about the wedding, making some exciting plans. The venue alone will cost $12,000, Wayne announced, like money spent on Nancy was money invested in him. Plus catering, flowers, photographer, we're looking at $30,000 minimum for a proper celebration. The number hung between us like a challenge. I sipped my coffee, waiting. Of course, Wayne continued. Nancy's salary at the marketing firm is decent, but hardly sufficient for the kind of wedding she deserves. A woman should feel like a princess on her special day. Nancy's cheeks flushed pink. Wayne, we talked about keeping things modest. Nonsense, Wayne's voice carried across 3 nearby tables. I won't have my bride settling for some budget ceremony. Archie, we know you're well off. Nancy told me about your pension and savings. Surely you want your only daughter to have a memorable wedding. The manipulation was textbook. Public setting to prevent scenes, emotional pressure through Nancy's happiness, financial assumptions based on second-hand information. I felt every eye in the restaurant assessing our little drama. I'm not obligated to fund your wedding. Wayne's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Then the charming smile returned, bigger and faker than before. What a miser. Nancy, does your dad really want you to be happy? Or is he one of those fathers who can't stand seeing another man provide for his daughter? Nancy looked stricken, caught between loyalty and embarrassment. Around us, conversations had quieted. Betty approached our table with forced cheer, clearly hoping to diffuse the situation. Everything okay here? Ready to order? Wayne ordered the most expensive entrant E on the menu. Nancy asked for soup, claiming she wasn't very hungry. I stuck with my usual meatloaf, wondering how many more family dinners would be ruined by the man sitting across from me. Through the restaurant's large windows, Denver's skyline glittered against the February night. The mountains beyond stood eternal and patient, having witnessed countless human dramas play out in their shadow. I thought about Helen, about what she would do in this moment, about Nancy's happiness versus her safety, about the difference between love and enabling. Fine, I said quietly. I'll help with the wedding costs. Wayne's victory smile was immediate and graceless. Nancy reached across the table to squeeze my hand, relief flooding her face. Thank you, Dad. This means everything to me. But as Wayne launched into detailed plans for flowers and music and open bars, I noticed Nancy's smile never quite reached her eyes. She'd gotten what she'd asked for, but somehow it didn't feel like winning. When the check came, Wayne made a show of reaching for his wallet before letting me pick up the tab. His expensive watch caught the light as he gestured, probably worth more than most people's monthly salary. Walking to our cars in the parking lot, Nancy hugged me goodbye with whispered thanks. Wayne shook my hand again, his grip slightly too firm, his smile slightly too bright. You're a good man, Archie. Family first, right? I watched them drive away, Nancy's profile rigid in the passenger seat. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. How did dinner go? I typed back. We'll talk tomorrow. But sitting in my car in the Mountain View parking lot, I already knew tomorrow's conversation would be different. Tonight had shown me something important. Wayne wasn't just after Nancy's happiness. He was after something much more valuable. The month between that restaurant confrontation and Nancy's wedding passed like a slow-motion avalanche. Inevitable, destructive, impossible to stop. I'd kept my distance as promised, watching from the sidelines while Wayne orchestrated what he called the perfect celebration. Rocky Peak's venue sat perched above Denver like a crystal palace, all gleaming windows and mountain views. Nancy had dreamed of this place since she was 12, cutting pictures from bridal magazines and pasting them in scrapbooks I'd thought she'd forgotten. She looked radiant walking down the aisle, her dress catching afternoon light like spun silver. For those few minutes, watching her face glow with happiness, I almost convinced myself I'd been wrong about Wayne. Almost. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of traditional vows and camera flashes. Wayne played his part perfectly. The devoted groom, the successful businessman, the man who'd won Nancy's heart. Only I seemed to notice how his smile never quite reached his eyes. But it was the reception where Wayne's true nature emerged. My assigned seat told the whole story. Table 12, tucked in the back corner with Nancy's great-aunt Muriel and some distant cousins I'd met twice. The head table stretched across the front like a stage, Wayne holding court, while Nancy tried to include everyone in conversations he consistently redirected toward himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Wayne's voice boomed across the reception hall as he stood with champagne flute raised. I want to thank everyone who came to celebrate with Nancy and me today. The room quieted. Expectant faces turned toward the head table. Nancy beamed up at her new husband, radiant with joy. Special thanks to those who believed in our love from the beginning, Wayne continued, his gaze deliberately skipping over my table. Some people said we were moving too fast, that love at our age was foolish. I felt my jaw tighten. Around me, Nancy's work colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Nancy and I prove that when you know, regardless of what naysayers think. Wayne's eyes found mine across the crowded room. Here's to new beginnings and leaving old prejudices behind. The applause was polite, but scattered. Even from my distant table, I could see Nancy's forced smile as she processed her husband's public humiliation of her father on their wedding day. Leo appeared at my elbow, sliding into the empty chair beside me. Granddad, are you okay? Fine. I loosened my tie, suddenly feeling like it was choking me. Just tired. But I wasn't fine. Watching Wayne parade Nancy around the dance floor while her guests whispered behind their hands, seeing her try to smooth over his calculated rudeness, recognizing the pattern I'd witnessed with Jason, none of it was fine. Wayne's friends concerned me most. 3 men in expensive suits who'd arrived together and spent the entire reception huddled in conversation, occasionally glancing toward Nancy with expressions that made my skin crawl. They didn't look like business colleagues or old friends. They looked like people who worked in shadows. May I have this dance? Wayne's voice carried clearly across the room as the band began playing their special song. Nancy melted into his arms like she was exactly where she belonged. But as they swayed together in the center of the dance floor, Wayne's eyes remained fixed on me over Nancy's shoulder. His smile was triumphant, predatory, the look of a man who'd just closed the biggest deal of his career. Leo gripped my arm suddenly. Granddad, I need some air. Too stuffy in here. I watched him weave between tables toward the outdoor terrace, his face pale despite the warm reception hall lighting. Wedding receptions were overwhelming for introverts, but Leo had seemed fine all afternoon. The first dance ended to enthusiastic applause. Wayne spun Nancy once more, then dipped her dramatically, playing to the crowd like a performer who lived for applause. When I looked toward the terrace doors, Leo was nowhere to be seen. Leo burst through the terrace doors like he'd seen a ghost, scanning the reception hall frantically before his eyes locked on mine. He pushed through the crowd of wedding guests, his formal shirt untucked, face flushed with something between panic and rage. Granddad! He reached my table breathless. We have to stop this wedding right now. The urgency in his voice cut through the reception noise like a fire alarm. I stood immediately, catching his arm to steady him. Leo, what are you talking about? His real name is William Harrison. Leo's words tumbled out in a whisper shout. He's a criminal. I heard him talking to those men outside. He was bragging about it. My blood turned to ice water. That's impossible. He was laughing about taking Mom's money and disappearing. Leo's eyes were wide with terror. Granddad, he's done this before. In Phoenix, in Seattle. He marries women and steals everything. The reception continued around us. Laughter, clinking glasses, the band launching into another romantic ballad. But I felt like I'd been dropped into a nightmare where everything looked normal, but nothing was real. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard? Leo nodded frantically. I went outside because it was hot in here, and those weird guys Wayne came with were smoking by the big planters. Wayne was with them, and I heard him say, William Harrison has 3 warrants out for his arrest, but Wayne Harlan is clean as a whistle. My legs felt unsteady. I gripped the back of my chair, trying to process information that confirmed every instinct I'd ignored. What else did you hear? They were talking about the honeymoon, about how Mom keeps all her banking information in her purse, how easy it'll be to drain her accounts while they're in Mexico. Leo's voice cracked. One of the guys asked about the old man's money. They meant you, Granddad. Wayne said once the wedding was done, he'd have access to everything. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Wayne's questions about my house value, his insistence on an expensive wedding funded by my accounts, his rush to marry Nancy despite knowing her less than 6 months. I'd been watching a long con unfold in real time. Where are they now? I looked toward the terrace doors. They went back inside through the side entrance when the cake cutting started. Wayne's acting normal, but those guys are watching everyone like they're planning something. Across the reception hall, Nancy was cutting wedding cake with Wayne's hands covering hers on the knife handle. She looked blissfully happy, feeding him a bite while photographers captured every smile, every laugh, every moment of joy that was built on lies. We have to tell her, Leo whispered, right now, before they leave for their honeymoon tomorrow. But how do you tell a bride on her wedding day that her new husband is a professional con artist. How do you explain that everything she believes about her future is a carefully constructed fraud designed to destroy her financially and emotionally? I watched Wayne scan the room, his gaze stopping when he noticed Leo and me in intense conversation. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the charming groom mask slipping just enough to reveal something calculating underneath. "He's watching us," I murmured to Leo. "Yeah, he does that. He's always watching, always listening." Leo's voice carried a maturity that broke my heart. "Granddad, what do we do? Mom will never believe us without proof." Wayne whispered something to Nancy, who glanced our way with a concerned expression. Then he began walking toward our table, his public smile bright as stage lights. "Leo! Archie! Come join us for cake." His voice boomed across the reception hall. Family should be together for the important moments. But there was steel behind his jovial invitation, and I recognized it for what it was, a command, not a request. Wayne was pulling us back into his orbit before we could become a problem. The trap was closing around Nancy, around all of us, and we were running out of time to stop it. Wayne's approach across the reception hall felt like watching a predator close in on prey. I had maybe 30 seconds before he reached our table. 30 seconds to decide how to handle information that could save or destroy my daughter. "Act normal," I whispered to Leo. "Don't let him know you heard anything." Leo straightened his tie and forced a smile, but I could see his hands trembling. My 15-year-old grandson was holding family-destroying secrets, and Wayne was walking directly toward us with that politician's grin plastered across his face. "There's my favorite in-laws." Wayne's voice carried that false heartiness I'd learned to recognize. "Nancy was worried you two looked lonely over here." Behind him, Nancy approached with cake plates, her wedding dress rustling against reception hall chairs. She looked concerned, probably wondering why her father and son were having such an intense conversation during her celebration. "Just telling Leo about the good old days," I managed, standing to accept Wayne's aggressive handshake. "You know how teenagers love family history." "Of course they do." Wayne's grip lingered too long, his eyes searching my face for signs of suspicion. "Though sometimes the past is better left buried, don't you think?" The double meaning wasn't lost on me. This was a warning, delivered with a smile while wedding guests danced around us. Nancy reached our table with cake, still glowing with happiness. "Dad, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired, sweetheart." "Big day." But I wasn't tired. I was terrified. Every minute Wayne remained married to Nancy was another minute he had legal access to her life, her accounts, her trust. Leo's revelation had turned the wedding reception into a countdown to disaster. "Actually, Nancy, I was hoping to speak with you privately for a moment." I kept my voice casual, grandfatherly. "Nothing serious, just wanted to tell you how proud your mother would have been today." Wayne's hand found Nancy's waist immediately. "How sweet. But Nancy's been on her feet all day greeting guests. Maybe save the family moments for later." "Dad, Wayne's right. I should get back to everyone." Nancy's smile was apologetic, but firm. "We can talk tomorrow before we leave for the airport." Tomorrow would be too late. By tomorrow, they'd be on their way to Mexico, where Wayne could disappear with Nancy's money, leaving her stranded in a foreign country with no resources and no idea who she'd actually married. "Nancy, please. It's important." Something in my tone must have broken through her wedding day euphoria, because she paused, really looking at me for the first time all evening. "What kind of important?" Wayne's grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. "Archie, whatever family business you have can surely wait until—" "It's about your safety," I said quietly, directly to Nancy. "About things you need to know before you leave the country." The words hung in the reception hall air. Like smoke from a fire, everyone could smell, but nobody could see. Around us, wedding guests continued celebrating. The band played romantic ballads. Photographers captured happy moments. But our small circle had gone deadly quiet. Nancy's face changed, wedding joy replaced by growing alarm. "Dad, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" Wayne stepped closer to Nancy, his body language shifting from charming host to protective barrier. "Your father's had a long day, darling. Maybe he's confused." "I'm not confused." I met Wayne's eyes directly. "And neither is Leo." At the mention of Leo's name, Wayne's mask slipped completely. For just a second, I saw the real man underneath, cold, calculating, dangerous. Then the politician's smile returned, but it was too late. Nancy had seen it too. What does Leo have to do with anything? Her voice carried new uncertainty. Dad, what's going on? 5 minutes, I said. Give me 5 minutes alone, and I'll explain everything. Wayne moved to block any path between Nancy and me. Absolutely not. Nancy, your father has been trying to sabotage our relationship from day one. Don't let him poison your wedding day with more paranoid. Let him talk, Nancy said suddenly. Wayne, just let him talk. It was the first time all evening she'd contradicted her new husband in public, and from the way Wayne's jaw clenched, it wouldn't be the last time tonight that carefully constructed plans began falling apart. Nancy followed me to the venue's small preparation room, her wedding dress rustling with irritation. Through the closed door, reception laughter felt like mockery of what I was about to destroy. Dad, make this quick. She checked her watch, every gesture screaming impatience. People will notice I'm gone. Nancy, Leo overheard something terrible about Wayne. Her face hardened instantly. This is impossible. Not today, not on my wedding day. His real name is William Harrison. He's wanted by the FBI. Stop it! Her voice cracked like breaking glass. You're just jealous that I found someone who makes me happy. This is exactly what you did with Jason. But Jason had been weak, not criminal. I pulled out my phone, searching quickly for the information Leo had given me. Look up William Harrison, 45 years old, wanted for fraud. Nancy snatched her phone from her purse, fingers flying over the screen. I'll prove you wrong right now. I'll show you that Wayne is exactly who he says. Her words died as the first image loaded. Wayne's face stared back from a police mugshot, the same charming smile now looking predatory under harsh booking lights. Below the photo, bold text, Wanted, William Harrison, 45. Multiple counts, fraud, and embezzlement. Nancy's hands began trembling. She scrolled down, finding more photos, more charges, news articles about victims whose stories mirrored her own whirlwind romance. Phoenix widow loses life savings to marriage scammer. Seattle teacher victimized by professional con artist. FBI manhunt continues for William Harrison, accused of targeting single mothers. The phone slipped from Nancy's nerveless fingers, clattering against the hardwood floor. Her wedding dress suddenly looked like a costume from a play where she'd been the only actor who didn't know the script. Oh no. Her voice was barely a whisper. This really is him. What have I done? She collapsed into the preparation room's chair, $30,000 worth of wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. Her carefully styled hair began falling as she buried her face in her hands. How could I be so blind? You tried to warn me, and I called you paranoid. I moved closer, wanting to comfort her, but unsure if she'd accept it. Nancy, none of this is your fault. He's a professional criminal. This is what he does for a living. But I defended him against you. I made you pay for our wedding. Tears were ruining her makeup, black mascara tracks marking her cheeks like war paint. I chose a criminal over my own father. Through the window, Colorado's mountains stood eternal and patient, having witnessed countless human dramas play out in their shadow. But this felt different, more personal, like the peaks themselves were holding their breath. What if he runs? What if he figures out we know? Nancy's voice carried new terror. What if he hurts someone? I knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in mine. We're calling the police right now. He won't hurt anyone else. She looked up at me through tear-clumped lashes, and for a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who'd run to Daddy when nightmares made sleep impossible. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. You listened when it mattered most? I handed her my handkerchief, the same one Helen had embroidered with my initials 20 years ago. That's all that counts. Nancy wiped her eyes, then straightened in her chair with determination I recognized from her childhood. The same look she'd worn when learning to ride her bike, refusing to quit despite scraped knees. What do we do when we go back out there? We act normal. We wait for help to arrive. I dialed 911, Nancy listening as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. Wanted fugitive. Active wedding reception. Rocky Peaks venue. Officers en route. How long? Nancy asked when I hung up. 20 minutes. She stood, checking herself in the preparation room mirror, fixing smeared makeup with steady hands. The frightened bride was gone, replaced by a survivor. Then we'd better get back before he comes looking. Nancy leaned against my shoulder as fresh tears started, and I remembered holding her this way when she was 7 and her pet hamster died. Some things never change between fathers and daughters. He fooled everyone, sweetheart. That's how professional con artists work. But you saw through him immediately. She pulled back, looking at me with wonder and regret mixed together. Why didn't I trust your instincts? Because you're supposed to make your own choices. That's what growing up means. She laughed bitterly, gesturing at her elaborate wedding dress. Some choice. I married a wanted criminal. We can fix this, I said firmly, but we need to act now before he realizes anything's wrong. Nancy nodded, wiping her face with my handkerchief. The police, when will they get here? 15 minutes, maybe 20. Can you hold it together that long? I have to. She stood up straighter, and I saw the steel in her spine that had carried her through single motherhood and career challenges. What's our story for why I was gone? Bathroom emergency, wedding dress complications, whatever sounds normal. She was quiet for a moment, staring at her phone screen where Wayne's mugshot still glowed like an accusation. Dad, what if he tries to run when the police show up? Let them handle it. That's their job. What if his friends are criminals too? Those weird guys he brought. I'd been wondering the same thing. We'll stay close to Leo. Keep him safe. Nancy picked up her phone, scrolling through the criminal records again. Listen to this. Harrison typically targets recently divorced women with assets, using romance and rushed marriage proposals to gain access to finances. That's exactly what he did to me. Stop reading that, I said gently. It'll just make you feel worse. No, I need to see all of it. I need to understand what almost happened. Her voice was getting stronger with each revelation. Look, victim in Phoenix lost her house, retirement savings, and custody deposits for her children's college funds. That could have been me. Outside the preparation room, wedding music continued playing. Our absence had been noted, but not yet questioned. Nancy, we should go back soon. She nodded, taking one last look in the mirror. The bride who'd entered this room was gone forever, replaced by someone harder, wiser, more careful. How do I face him knowing what I know? The same way you've faced every other challenge in your life, with grace. She squeezed my hand. I can't believe I almost lost you over him. You didn't lose me. You never could. Nancy straightened her shoulders, smoothing her wedding dress one final time. Okay, let's go pretend everything's normal while we wait for the FBI to arrest my husband. Just remember, he's good at reading people. Don't give him any reason to suspect. She opened the door to sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, the reception in full swing. Wayne's voice carried across the room, holding court with some story that had guests laughing appreciatively. There's my beautiful bride, he called out as Nancy appeared. I was starting to worry. Just freshening up, Nancy replied smoothly. You know how these old dresses can be. Wayne wrapped his arm possessively around her waist, and I watched Nancy force herself not to flinch. Her acting skills were better than I'd expected. Your father looks tired, Wayne observed, his tone suggesting this was somehow my fault. Maybe all this excitement is too much for him. Dad's fine, Nancy said firmly. Aren't you, Dad? I nodded, playing my part in this suddenly deadly charade. Around us, wedding guests continued celebrating, completely unaware that the groom was a wanted criminal. My phone buzzed with a text. Units approaching venue. Maintain normal appearance. The countdown had begun. 20 minutes of acting normal felt like 20 hours. Nancy played her part perfectly, dancing with Wayne, cutting cake, accepting congratulations from guests who had no idea they were celebrating a lie. Leo appeared at my elbow during the band's slow songs. Granddad, is it happening soon? Very soon, I squeezed his shoulder. You did good, kiddo. You saved your mom. Through the venue's large windows, I spotted the first police car pulling into the parking lot, without lights or sirens. Professional, discreet, exactly what the situation required. Nancy saw them too. Her smile never wavered, but I caught her almost imperceptible nod. 2 uniformed officers entered through the main doors, moving with the casual confidence of men who'd done this many times before. They approached our family table, where Wayne was regaling guests with another story about his business success. Excuse me, sir. The lead officer's voice was polite but firm. Wayne Harlan? That's me. Wayne's politician smile was bright as stage lights. Officers, is everything all right? I hope we're not too loud for the neighbors. We'd like to speak with you privately, sir. Of course. Happy to help. Wayne started to follow them toward the venue's entrance, still playing the cooperative citizen. But the second officer remained close behind, hand resting casually near his handcuffs. They'd done their homework. Near the venue entrance, away from most guests but still visible to our table, the conversation shifted. The lead officer produced a tablet, showing Wayne something that made his confident posture crumble. William Harrison, the officer's voice carried clearly across the now quiet reception, you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement across multiple states. Wayne's mask finally fell away completely. This is impossible. I'm Wayne Harlan. I just got married. Sir, we have fingerprints from the wine glasses, multiple outstanding warrants. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. That's when Wayne's survival instincts kicked in. He bolted toward the terrace doors, wedding guests scattering like startled birds. But the second officer was already moving, tackling Wayne before he reached the exit. The wrestling match lasted maybe 10 seconds before Wayne was face down on the polished floor, hands cuffed behind his back, expensive tuxedo rumpled and torn. You have the right to remain silent. As they hauled Wayne to his feet, his eyes found mine across the reception hall, burning with fury and hatred. You did this, old man, he screamed, struggling against the handcuffs. You destroyed everything. You'll pay for this. But his threats felt empty now, the desperate rage of a cornered animal. Nancy stepped forward, addressing the confused wedding guests with remarkable composure. I need you all to know what really happened here today. The man I married is a wanted criminal who was planning to steal my money and disappear. My father and son saved me from the worst mistake of my life. Some guests gasped, others pulled out phones to record, but most just stared in stunned silence. I walked over to Leo, pulling him forward. This young man is the real hero. He overheard the truth and had the courage to speak up. Leo blushed but stood straighter, accepting handshakes and praise from guests who were still processing the evening's dramatic turn. As they led Wayne out in handcuffs, his 3 suspicious friends had already vanished, probably out the back exits the moment they'd spotted police cars. Nancy removed her wedding ring and handed it to one of the officers. Evidence, she said simply. The reception hall fell quiet, except for the soft background music that felt absurdly cheerful after such drama. Wedding decorations that had been beautiful an hour ago now looked like props from a play that had ended badly. Leo moved to stand between Nancy and me, and we watched through the windows as Wayne was loaded into a police car, his shouting muffled by closed doors and bulletproof glass. Is it really over? Nancy asked. It's over, I confirmed, putting my arms around both my daughter and grandson. We're safe now. The police car pulled away, carrying Wayne back to face justice for his crimes. Around us, wedding guests were gathering their things, offering support and expressing amazement at the evening's revelations. But I was focused on my family. 3 generations united by crisis, stronger now than we'd been in years. Outside the venue windows, the sun was setting behind Colorado's mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A beautiful ending to an ugly day. Justice served, family protected, truth revealed. Sometimes that's all an old man can ask for. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.